In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Look at My Star Trek Toys, a little show where I show Mike, my buddy here who doesn't know much about Star Trek, all of my Star Trek toys, because I'm still 13. 13's a little too old for that. I'd be like showing you like my dad's Playboys from 1982. I'm like 11 showing you my Star Trek toys. But I'm very excited to do it. This week we are continuing the Next Generation Season 1 and 2 figures. How's it going, Mike? Are you pumped?
I'm pumped. Enjoyed part 1 of this. Part 2, I did catch some criticism because I was not using the original bridge for my background the first season. So this week...
Talk about your bridge there.
Yeah, let me get out of the way. I'd like to... Oh, boy.
You can't beam yourself out.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
I'm going low.
Mike's going into the kitchen.
So, this is thanks to ForgottenTrek.com. Andrew Probert was the first senior illustrator on Star Trek The Next Generation, and his first job was to provide concepts for the design of the new bridge. Now, an early writer's Bible described the bridge as combining the features of ship control, briefing room, information retrieval, and officer's wardroom. So there were the same kind of things happen as the old bridge, but with less emphasis on the mechanics and steering. This approach inspired the presence of couches and even a conference table on the bridge in early sketches.
Yeah, and the touchscreen pads that we all use every single day, which has now become what you can't see because of the there it is. There's my cat on my iPhone, which is they invented iPads very early here on the Trek. I believe we've talked about it, and I have a picture here from the pilot from Encounter at Farpoint, also showing the bridge right from the very beginning. And what's interesting is because you never see this angle of the bridge other than the pilot because they zoomed up to show it, are the little seat pads next to the three main chairs. Because if you're going to be filming there for 8 hours while you're getting your coverage and have to sit on that little weird bar there, that's going to be a little sore on your butt. So thankfully, the Enterprise D bridge is designed for comfort, and which is why it looks a little bit like the lobby of a Holiday Inn.
Fair.
But I like it. I actually think it looks super cool, and I love the horseshoe design. And obviously, they didn't really go in this direction in any of the subsequent series, but I kind of miss it. I like it. And, with a big old ship like that, you have space. The size of the Enterprise is extraordinary. The D is, like, gigantic. Anyway, you're gonna transition me already.
I was going to make an immature joke, Keith, but we're above that on this show.
We are above making a joke about a gigantic D. Okay. Wow, that's so tasteless. And what's even more tasteless is I knew exactly where you were going with that. So that's why we're friends. Okay, so let us hop forward and start talking about these kick-ass action figures. And let's begin with our first officer. And that is figure 6074, Commander Riker. Let's have him beam in. There he is, Commander Riker, Jonathan Frakes, of course. Now, do you know how you can tell what season this is? There's only one era where you can be absolutely certain what season it is when we see a picture of Jonathan Frakes.
Does it have to do with facial hair?
It does. It does indeed, because in season 1, Jonathan Frakes was clean shaven. But in the break between seasons 1 and season 2, he grew a beard, going in expecting to shave it on the first day of filming, and they're like, you know what? No, that's fine. We like it. Keep it. And thus, the great beard of the galaxy was invented and joined us for the rest of the series, which was cool. Like that, this is the iconic Riker look, but you can tell that it's season 2 because if you have the beard and the stripe, it's season 2. If you have the stripe but no beard, it's season 1. If you don't have the stripe but you have the beard, it's season 3 through 7. So anyway, we have our figure here. Now, this is also a very interesting figure in my opinion, because clearly they did a reuse of the Series 1 figure. Now, do you remember anything in particular about the Series 1 figure that gave us all pause?
No.
Well, it's because Riker was all fucked up.
Oh, right. And
he had the torn
correct.
uniform. He had the torn shirt and everything, and he looked like he'd been attacked by a wild beast. And so it was always weird, which is why one of the most requested figures for the new line is a non-fucked up Riker. And so this one, you know what? It's almost like we got it just with the stripe on the shoulder. But look more carefully. Look at his leg right there. It is still the fucked up mold for his legs and arms. They just painted it in.
Oh, look at that.
Which is crazy. So on his left leg, you can see it twirling there, and on his left shoulder, you can see there is damage there that they just painted over and pretended like it wasn't there.
For a side-by-side on the toy cam?
I can if you talk for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, now nobody was out of shape in this show, but you can definitely tell here in this screenshot, season 1 and 2 of like a new gig, everybody came in high and tight, as Keith had said, like real fit. And I think Keith is back.
I'm back.
I was just talking about how like you're on a new gig, first season, second season of a show, how skinny everybody is.
Yeah, well, you know, everyone watches the first season like, oh crap, that's what I look like. And then it happens on every show ever. After the first season, everybody hits the gym. All right, so let's hop over to Toy Cam and we can take a look at these two together. So it very clearly is just a swapped out torso and a repaint of the rest. But if you look at the leg there, there's the battle damage, and it's the same leg, they just painted over the damage, or painted it all black, as opposed to adding some of his skin coming out, and the same thing on the shoulder. You can see...
now, it'd be so easy to have just swapped the legs.
It could have been, and it's an odd decision, but I guess like the Riker legs were Riker legs, and they didn't want to make it obvious that it was somebody else's legs, but you can see the hands are exactly the same.
Well, and I guess they just had a ton of inventory, right? And they were like, we can't just let this go to waste. We gotta
I don't know if it was that or just
recycle.
Recycle. I think it was probably more to do than the actual sculpting was probably super expensive and time consuming to do. So it's the same head, it's the same everything, although you can tell that there's color variations. His Series 1 figure is much darker and more maroon, and his the Season 1 is much brighter red, which I don't actually know if that was the case in the actual series. But actually, if you thanks for beaming in, Jonathan. Can we go back to Toy Cam one more time? Oh, okay, that's all right. We'll see.
Maybe we'll see how much work I want to do.
I'm very proud. I've got into the family business and designed my own transporter sound. So I'm the third person in my family to do a transporter sound, although theirs got a little bit more play. You can see, while we're looking at it, the difference in the collars that I was talking about last episode, that the later uniforms had a higher collar and the pips were moved up onto the collar. as opposed to sort of stuck on the chest without much of a collar there. So we saw a little more Frakes chest, which I'm sure everybody was happy with. And yeah, there it is. It's interesting little details, an interesting window into the production of the toys, not just the series. And if we're paying attention, coming up, whenever we do the Thomas Riker figure from the Next Gen era, we did the Thomas Riker on Deep Space Nine figure, it's going to be the same thing. Huh. They are going to reuse this same figure, but painted gold, but he was gold. So we'll actually even have painted over damage on the chest that we're just supposed to not think is there. Even though, ironically, Thomas Riker has a much better case for having the torn uniform, because when they discovered him having lived on the planet for 8 years or whatever it was, I think I remember his uniform was pretty scuffed up. Although it was a good attention to detail, because even though it was later in Next Gen, he was still wearing the old style uniform that we're reviewing today. So good attention to detail, even though his figure
look at
is
that
not.
baseball card. Oof.
Yes, that is just Frakes. He's probably just making friends with the camera person, and
he's just cheesing.
He sure is. Well, I mean, I think that's closer to his actual personality. And that's one of the changes that they made on the character of Riker, because in season 1, he was a bit of a hard ass. He didn't have this great sense of humor. He was just sort of like the, typical first officer. I'm tough. I'm no nonsense. I'm whatever. And then they sort of realized that Jonathan Frakes as a person is just sort of fun and warm and funny. And they're like, we need to start incorporating that more into the character. So with his beard, we start to see more of his personality emerging into the character as well, which I think is cool. All right, let us continue forward and take a look at our next figure, and that is 6076 Season 2 Troi. Here she comes. Now, you'll remember, in Series 1, she was wearing her gray jumpsuit. But in Season 2, they developed this more maroon jumpsuit. And, Troi, until Captain Jellicoe made her wear her standard duty uniform, she wore a lot of different things, and it would come and go. And so we would see this one, and then the gray one, then a teal one, and then back to the gray one, and then back to this one. But this was one of her more iconic uniforms that we saw a lot of the time. But it's not a standard Starfleet uniform, and yet she was a commander actually. And but we have her communicator here, and I believe that's the same head as the Series 1. But talk to me about this figure.
Very plain. The whole the red motif kind of I would argue is a little bit boring. However, in this particular figure, it really makes a communicator pop pretty cool. And I think the sculpting of her hair is just so kind of interesting and detailed that it really wins me over.
Yeah, although I do think they toned down her makeup after the first series. Yeah. She looked pretty ridiculous in the Series 1. But I like actually seeing this screenshot from the high def version, the detailing on her shoulders and neckline. It has some texture to it, which on the old standard definition television, I never saw that texture.
Right.
And it's one of the nice things about the remaster. You can see some of the detail work that went into these costumes and alien designs and that kind of stuff that we never were able to see. So that's one of the nice things about the remasters. And I certainly hope that they finally can get to the Deep Space Nine and Voyager remasters and get that in HD. Mike, talk to me about the box.
Love the box. Loving her choking hazards. Well, I don't know if I'm loving them, but they're different. They're a different set of stuff. Yeah, That's about all. Although her makeup in the boxed version here, this picture looks a little bit more goofy.
It does look yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if they adjusted the makeup at some point in the process there.
Or you might just have sort of a fade job on your paint.
It's possible. It's possible. I do like the gold choking hazards, and I like the detail work they have adding the stickers to it, so there's something on the screen. Which, it's interesting that Playmates was very inconsistent with that. The level of effort they put into the choking hazards definitely varied from figure to figure and series to series. And I imagine, because like the pad they have there, a little desktop monitor, where you can see there they've got a sticker on it. You can see a picture of the ship. And a lot of times they would put out that same mold, but without the sticker on it. So I'm assuming that they had different budgets based on which figure it was and which series it was. And for some of the less popular figures, it's like, look, we're only going to make 30,000 of these. There's not, there's no point in putting extra detail into that. Yeah, you know what? I can see she's got some pink eyeshadow, which looks a little bit more prominent than on my figure, but it is there now that I look at it more carefully. But yeah, I mean, this is the Troi that I think I envision most when I think of Troi. That this is the uniform for whatever reason, that's the picture I have of my head. Not a picture of my head, the picture in my head.
Nobody would collect that.
No. Oh God, no, that would be bad. My therapist doesn't even want it. So there we are. That's Troi. We will, of course, show her in her standard duty uniform later, that she wore, which I think was a request of hers, and I think makes a great deal of sense, as she's an actual commander, for God's sakes. She should, be in her uniform. Now, last episode, we introduced Beverly Crusher and Gates McFadden as the season 1 doctor on the Enterprise, who was, let go for having opinions while being female. And she was replaced by our next figure for season 2, and that is figure 6428, Dr. Pulaski. Let's take a look. Okay, so here we are with Dr. Pulaski, played by Diana Muldaur, who is an interesting piece of Star Trek lore because she was also on the original series. She did 2 different episodes as 3 different characters. She was Dr. Anne Mulhall / Tallis in Return to Tomorrow, and Dr. Miranda Jones in Is There in Truth No Beauty? Interesting playing different characters on the same show. Not only that, it was only 6 episodes later that she played a different character, and both of these were major characters. So, certainly an interesting piece of Star Trek lore. So, after season 1, they're like, we need a new doctor, and in she comes, and definitely was going for a change in how the doctor worked. And so she came in with the Southern accent and with the attitude and casual speciesism of Dr. McCoy. And so she came in, she had the Southern accent, she was sort of a little crunchier, she was super bigoted towards Data, like McCoy was with Vulcans and such, and was an interesting character. She had some great moments on the show. She was particularly good in the elementary Dear Data Sherlock Holmes holodeck episode. But she never really hit it with fans, which is why they worked hard to get Dr. Crusher back. So tell me about your first impressions here about this figure and about this character. Have you seen episodes with Dr. Pulaski?
I'm sure I have, though they escape me right now. I can tell just from the screenshot and the figure. I mean, I would feel that she's got sort of a stoicism is what's being kind of portrayed to me here. So I don't know if there's any truth to that, but that's kind of the feel I'm getting. I'm
No,
curious
for sure.
I'm curious as to why why we're looking at a different box.
Very good question. Because they didn't make this figure until much later in the run. This came in during the mixed series. I believe this was probably 98. So it was years after the rest of them. And because she wasn't a very popular character with the fans, the figure was sort of there to complete the set more than it was somebody that, certainly like it's not necessarily a figure that kids really wanted.
Right.
It's a little tough, and of course, like, what do I know? I don't know anything about it. But the rumor and innuendo, she had a rough time on the show. I don't think she enjoyed her experience on it. So, the people weren't responding to the character. And so this figure, I'm glad to have it because she's an important part of Trek history, but the character was kind of forgotten. Even though I thought she had some good moments, and you can sort of tell in the figure that it's a little bit forgotten because obviously they sculpted a head for her, but the actual figure, this isn't what Dr. Pulaski wore, and it's a little hard to tell from the screenshot there, but she wore sort of a longer tunic that went down past her waist. She didn't wear the standard duty uniform. And in the picture, you can see there's no sort of like that black cutout triangle above her waist because she wore this weird sort of doctor tunic deal. And they didn't bother to represent that in the figure because they were reusing pieces from other figures. I'm pretty sure this is a reuse of the entire body, minus the torso of some of the other characters. There's a crusher in this scale, and there's this, that, and other thing. So I think they were just sort of cutting corners a little bit just to complete the idea here. You'll also note that on the figure itself, she has no pips. You can see she's a commander rank from the screenshot there, but there are no pips at all. If you go to Toy Cam, I can show you. She has no rank whatsoever. Here we are. So, I don't know. I feel like Playmates sort of felt about this figure what everyone else was feeling about the character, and they're like, okay. And so it doesn't seem like they put a lot of effort into this figure, which is too bad because I think Diana Muldaur kind of got screwed by the writing of her character because she was sort of gruff and people reacted very badly to her treatment of Data. She just like couldn't conceive of him as a person because he was a machine, and like just super bigoted, and which is really startling now when you see it. And they felt they were trying to make the new McCoy, and it wasn't her fault. She did a great job. Like she's a terrific actress, and it really was not given really a fair shot. And people were salty that Gates McFadden was fired, and they should have been. But we don't need to take it out on the poor actor replacing her. So anyway, those are my thoughts about that. Do you have any last thoughts about Dr. Pulaski?
No. Though, I remember last episode you didn't love Geordi and Red. So do we got anything else?
Oh, we sure do. And, perhaps a Geordi in his standard gold, but with a twist. Let's hop over to figure 6443. So this is similar to Riker, how you can tell exactly what season we're in. This is season 2, Geordi. So we see him now as the chief engineer, but still wearing the early uniforms. So we can see it's you can see all his business, and it's tight there. And from the screenshot there, you can see that the construction of this one looked like it might have been a little rushed. Wasn't the greatest representation. Look, A, it probably was rushed, and B, they were expecting this to be in 320 by 240 lines of resolution, 480 tops. So this, full high definition, they were really not expecting all of this detail, and we certainly didn't see it on our television screens in 1988 when it first aired. But here we are, Chief Engineer Geordi, which is exciting to see. Obviously, the much more iconic Geordi that we know and love. And so this was actually an interesting figure for Playmates. So if you go to the box, let's take a look at the box of Geordi here. That's Tasha Yar. The spoiler alert.
No, I think well, hold on.
I don't know. You think we might talk about that figure later?
Well, really blew that.
Oh God.
Hold on. I can do this. Can do it live.
I believe in you. Well, I'll start setting it up, and that is this figure also came out much later, and was a rare one because we already did a season 1 Geordi. They had to make one extra Geordi to represent his figure in the gold. They didn't do a Worf in the gold season 2 with the stripe, but they did do a Geordi, and they did it as this weird interstellar action they were trying to sell it as. And we'll see when we get the box there. He had this crazy intense, there it is, like phaser rifle that like pew-pewed. It actually like had a little spring in it that shot stuff. It was, according to them, a real spring-firing Starfleet phaser rifle. So Interstellar Action Series, which is weird to have Geordi, because Geordi wasn't the most pew-pew of all of the characters. But they wanted to, they needed to get this uniform represented, and it made sense to try to give it a little extra zhuzh to give him the fancy rifle there. So what do you think, Mike?
It's a good Geordi. I think the figure fared better than the character design early in TNG, but I think maybe it's LeVar Burton, maybe it's the just cool science fiction around his eyes, maybe it's his growth over the years, but I would say that though I love me some Jean-Luc Picard, really, really adore him, I think Geordi, I've always had a soft spot. I think Geordi might be my favorite.
Well, I mean, and it's tough to navigate Geordi versus LeVar Burton.
Yeah.
For those of us who grew up on LeVar Burton, on reading Rainbow, and also just knowing the type of guy he is as a person, like the coolest, nicest person out there. And so it's hard not to have respect for the character by way of the person. Interesting note about the character, again, in the rumors and innuendo, I don't know this for sure, but I believe the original plan was back in 1987 to have Geordi be gay.
Huh.
Which would have been so groundbreaking and so cool. And so against the show's, let's say, reluctance to represent that community on the show, which has always been a sore spot, an embarrassment for such a progressive show, that they were so uncomfortable with that for as long as they were. But that certainly would have been a very interesting element to add to the character, especially in 1987. It didn't happen, but I'll show you what did happen. If you hop over to Toy Cam, let's talk about why we can just keep pumping out all of these minor variations in figures, because here we have the season 1 and season 2 Geordi. You know how you can save a buck? You just paint them. You take the gold and you make it red, or take the red and you make it gold, and you copy paste and put out an entirely new figure. Which, of course makes sense. And most of this is the mold from the series 1 figure. It's identical there, minus the torso. So I get it, but it is interesting when you see them all side by side, like, wow, they really just copy pasted. Now you will notice here, I know you're going to ask, what about the holster for his phaser on the side there? Well, guess what? This one was designed for it, but it broke off at some point. So you can see the hole where the holster goes. Geordi did not actually have a hole in his butt. So there it is there. And actually, if you talk for a second, let me get series 1. We'll put them all 3 of them together.
Keith mentions that they did the paint job in order to save a buck. Truth be told, they didn't just save a buck, they made a buck, didn't they? Because Keith here bought every last one of them. Right, buddy?
All right.
Yeah, totally.
So here, we swapped out the torso. Although it looks as if they even might have reused everything but the shoulders, because with the little detail there on his side, with the wrinkle on his right side is consistent within all 3. So I think they literally just chopped off the collar, added a stripe, and added the pips. But other than that, it is the identical figure for all 3 of these Geordi figures. Interesting. So, although, he also has the holster hole on his butt there. So that obviously lost a holster in the shuffle at some point there. So, so I think look, I get it. It's smart. And I understand from Playmates' perspective, us fans, we want 500 different figures, most of them with tiny little variations. It's perfectly reasonable to reuse some of your pieces. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I was saying before you came back, I said it wasn't so much they were saving a buck, but actually making some extra bucks because people will buy them.
This guy did.
Yeah.
So not definitely did. Although I didn't buy these at the time. I started collecting these as an adult. The only ones that I bought at the time were the old Galoob, which were the ones made in season 1, which I first bought right when season 1 came out. All right. Well, as we continue our discussion of season 1, we've spoiled this figure a couple of times because she's right in front of you, right here on the screen here. There it is. Aha. And we already showed the box, but a very important, iconic character and story from Star Trek Season 1, and that is, of course, figure 6950. It's Tasha Yar. Okay, Denise Crosby as Tasha Yar was the original plan to be the head of security of the Enterprise and the Action Star, and was modeled after was it Aliens 2? I think it's the character of Ramirez. I may be wrong about that. But they were like, Aliens had just come out. They're like, that is the coolest thing in the world. I agree. Aliens, what an amazing movie. And so that character, they're like, we want to have one of those on the Enterprise. And so interestingly, one of the other people who auditioned for this character was Marina Sirtis, who went on to play Troi. But Denise Crosby got the role, and so for the first 3/4 of season 1, she was the badass action star, who basically was the pre-Worf on the Enterprise. Now, before we talk about what happened, let's talk about the figure. Mike, what do you see here? What do you feel?
I feel like for something that should be somewhat action heavy, I feel like maybe we could have had some. Oh, she does have some pretty giant guns, so that's cool. I guess her upper body proportions are, are interesting. As is the haircut.
Her upper body proportions are interesting. That is the most careful way that has ever been said.
Yeah. And the character of Tasha Yar, if I'm not mistaken, returns in the universe. No, they don't. We're going to talk about it, but I know that we've seen this figure before, or this character in figure form before.
We have, but I don't really want to spoil it. Exactly, because part of the objective of the show is to get Mike to plunk himself down and watch the whole series in order. And if you do, you will be rewarded with some subsequent appearances that will be super fun. And the second time Denise Crosby showed up, you know what I mean, fans. I remember watching. It was the end of part 1 of Redemption, and as a kid, I was lying on the floor of my grandparents' living room on the carpet there, watching it, and just like losing my mind when I was like, oh my God! It was one of the most fun like reveals I remember. Was it 91, 92? I was like 11 or 12, and I was just like, whoa! It was so much fun. But this was only possible because Denise Crosby left the show. Didn't even finish the whole season of season 1. She had some other opportunities and felt like her character was underwritten, which it was, and decided to leave the series and went on to star in Pet Sematary. I think was the big one that she did, and she's done plenty of other work. But certainly there's a bit of a David Caruso here, not realizing that the show was going to become this huge iconic thing. And frankly, I don't blame her because the show wasn't that good when she was on it,
right?
And she didn't realize that how much it was going to improve, which none of them did. I don't think Patrick Stewart unpacked his suitcase until season 2 or 3. Anyway, so she was killed off.
They killed her
It
off?
was in a very shocking turn. They literally killed pretty unceremoniously killed off the character in Face of Evil, which was it was also a disappointing way to have her die too, because it was sort of quick and arbitrary, and Roddenberry wanted to do it on purpose to have it be quick and arbitrary and surprising, because to set up the stakes that these things happen. Oh, there you go, Pet Sematary. But it was not a fitting send off for the character in Denise Crosby. Though she did have a good funeral scene, so that it's important to have a good funeral scene, and she definitely played a part, particularly in Data's character development moving forward. And in Measure of a Man, Data's keeping a memorial for her was part of what helped determine his sentience from Starfleet's standpoint. Mainly because, Mike, spoiler alert from episode 2, Data and Yar full on hook up.
Yes, and not even like on the holodeck. We're talking real deal.
No, they, as he would say, he is fully functional, and he done proved it. So, wow. We know, Data got down to business in the second episode of the series.
So what you're telling me, Keith, what you're saying to me is that not only did they invent the iPhone and the iPad, but they invented the sex robot?
They, I think that concept had showed up before that, but they certainly, I don't know if they invented it, but they perfected it. So, so that's, so there it is. And, but I'm really happy to have the figure. Now, for those of the Super Playmates fans out there, there's another very important Tasha Yar figure. She was one of the 1701s, which was, I think I've talked about a little bit before. We'll definitely do an entire episode on these 3 figures that they put out, the initial plan was to only make 1,701 of them each, which kind of killed off the series because they were impossible to get, and all us completist nerds couldn't get them all. So we're like, screw this. I'm not going to collect all these anymore. And oops. So a figure of Tasha Yar is one of those, and she has several others. There's a beaming Tasha Yar, and then there's the other character who shall not be named in front of Mike, but you know who I'm talking about. You know what? If people would like to spoil things for you, Mike, how could they do that?
Well, they could write me. Hey, just call me on the phone. My number. Just kidding. You can. You can write us at lookatmystartrektoys@gmail.com. Hey, too much to type in an email address? I get it. You can talk to us right here, right now on the YouTube. Just click and talk, and we will get back to you. Did Keith spell something wrong? Pronounce something wrong?
Definitely.
Did I offend someone? Probably. You can let us know in the comments below. Or if you don't want to talk at all and you just want to keep looking at pretty pictures, you can check it out. The Instagram at Star Trek Toys. That's us, baby. And in the interim, we'll get back to you when we can, how we can. Keith is working a second full-time job trying to get a hold of everybody.
Yes, indeed. And, hopefully we'll have some news from Playmates coming up early next year. So we get a little more details on the continuation of the series, which I am super pumped about. We want to see pictures of your customs, of your models, of your setups. Show us your stuff. Show us your toys. And we're going to do a whole episode about it, which I'm super excited about once we get there. And while you're there, like and subscribe. The more subscribers we get, the better chance we have at continuing this series and looking at other Star Trek toys as we move on. So, which we're super excited about. So tell your friends, like and subscribe, do all the things, and we will see you back next week with another episode of
Look at my Star Trek toys!